Welcome, welcome. My name is Lloyd Borrell. I'm your host. Today, I'm thrilled to have as my guest, Peter Sullivan. Peter Sullivan is an environmental health founder who focuses on toxins and wildlife safety. He's the founder and CEO of Clear Light Ventures and has spent the last 15 years successfully recovering his two sons from autism and sensory issues. Peter's work on detox and EMFs has been featured in numerous books, and he serves on the board of directors of pollution.org and on the advisory board for the International Institute for Building Biology Ecology. Previously, Peter worked as a software designer and served as an executive officer and pilot in the United States Navy. Peter Sullivan, welcome to the EMF Health Summit.
Hi, thank you, Lloyd. Good to be here.
It's great to have you on. So we spoke before, but please start by telling us your story, your personal story, the story with your children. If we could start there, please.
I never expected to be doing this sort of work. I was a software designer here in Silicon Valley, and my kids both had some developmental delays. Both got, one got kicked out of preschool. The other we had a little intervention that he wasn't social. And so I got some harsh feedback that things were not going exactly well. And around the same time period, I started having some fatigue and some real health issues myself with food allergies. And basically it took me a while to figure out that the things impacting my children were also impacting me. Now, the things impacting my children were impacting their development. I'd already fully developed, but I was still having health impacts, and we'll talk about that. So the kids were mildly diagnosed on the autism spectrum, although they're both verbal, they could both speak, but some were having one was having really bad sensory overreaction to sensory issues. The other one was very antisocial,
right?
And it just kind of going offline.
So wasn't it the teachers that were saying to you there was something going on, that weren't like interacting like normal children? Isn't that what alerted you initially?
Exactly. Yeah, the first teacher kind of said, this kid he needs to get diagnosed. He's like totally, and he was very high strung. And so he was diagnosed with sensory integration dysfunction. And we'll talk about how that relates to EHS and people getting high exposures. And basically that started happening to me later. I became pretty sensitive to noise and so forth. And we'll talk about how these kind of go together.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we got a diagnosis, and then we started just doing all these sensory treatments and everything and other interventions that really weren't root cause. And then I found out people were doing biological interventions, and we started looking at genetics and all these things. And I started working with scientists in this field. So eventually, after about 5 years, I took time off, and I'm still focusing just 100% on this to focus on my kids' health. Those kids have, fully recovered. Now, we did detoxification, we did EMF reduction, we did a wide range of things. And I had the time, I had the money, I had the connection to experts. So I had all the resources, but it was still hard for me. And so now I'm trying to go back and share all the information that I wish I had had 15, 20 years ago. So the kids are now both at UC Berkeley. One just graduated with a degree in computer science and stats. The other one is studying data science. They're high performance kids. They're smart, they're athletic, they're social. One was an actor. The youngest one got best actor last year in his high school. So so this was the kid who was antisocial. He's up on a stage giving a performance that's making, hundreds of people cry.
Yes.
And that's dramatic, right? Yes. So that's a really big transformation. And I had a similar situation going on. I was really overloaded. I'm 5'10" and about 160 pounds. But in 2009, I was 131 pounds and I had teeth cracking and I was really spacey. You could blow me over with a feather. And at that time I had been doing all this. I'd done everything I knew of. I was trying to do healthy building work. I was trying to do, eat well and exercise and everything, but it was clearly there was something missing. And I fell back to my earlier career as a troubleshooter to really systematically figure that out. And it turned out to be dirty electricity was one of the missing factors.
Right. Okay.
So it's a big success story, but we still need to get the word out. There's a lot of information on both autism and EHS, and I think we have enough information to really kind of solve and address these problems. And it's a matter of communication and taking action.
Yeah, so that's just to say, you must be a really proud father, and I'm so pleased that your kids
Thank you.
become this, and well done. You must be like a model father. I mean, I'm telling you so.
No, we just there was a lot of fighting involved, and
Okay, well, it makes me feel a little bit better then, yeah.
And it's still not perfect, yeah.
No, it's not. It's never perfect. So there's two things we want to address today. There's the autism and this EMF sensitivity, electrical hypersensitivity, EMF intolerance syndrome, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Perhaps we could start with the autism first, and just by explaining to people who are listening, what is autism, and then perhaps what causes it.
Boy, that's a long discussion. So there's a lot of controversy around autism. Some people think it's completely genetic. Some people think it's environmental and just one thing. So scientists looked for one gene for autism. We've now found over 1,000 that are risk factors. They looked for one environmental factor. People were very focused on mercury and other things at the time. I was focused on that. There are quite a few. There's numerous environmental factors, risk factors. And so it's really confusing. And there are a lot of symptoms to chase, just like with EHS. There's a lot of symptoms to chase. It turns out Martha Herbert wrote a paper with Cindy Sage saying the symptoms of autism match known symptoms of EMF exposure. And so, and there's a lot of symptoms, and she listed a lot of them out. Now, one thing that clarifies this, one thing that's common between these conditions, the thing that makes this all a little bit simpler, but not perfectly simple, is that the calcium channels. So the calcium channels that some people are familiar with at Martin Pall's work with the calcium channels in autism, calcium channels in EHS and EMF exposure. Calcium channels have been known to be a big factor in autism for a long time. Mm. I had over 10, like mid 2000s, I had one of the science advisors saying, we're seeing multiple genes, but we're noticing they're all along the calcium channel. And when Dr. Herbert, who did this paper, also did a genetic paper, they looked at in about 2014, they looked at 600 and some genes that had been associated with autism. And the largest cluster of them was on the calcium channel. Okay, so it looks like we've got everything pointing in one direction. So let's show that slide. Let's talk about calcium channels and what they do, what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a little graphic here, and this applies to both autism and the electrical stuff. And if you see this, you'll get this paradigm, and then we'll go through what we can do.
Yes, please. Yeah. Because we've talked we've talked a lot actually about calcium channels with other guests, but it's so important that if you've got a slide to share, that would be great.
All right, so I'm going to talk about some things that you're not hearing, you're not hearing before. So let's just see this. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to pretend like this circle. We're going to talk about intracellular calcium. Pretend like this circle is the cell membrane. Mm-hmm. Now, if it's a neuron, it's going to look more like a tree. But just to keep it simple, so we've got this cell, and on the inside of the cell is normally very, very low calcium. When the calcium goes in, it's a signal to excite the cell. Now, so this is not the signal of like saying this is a yes, no. It's not the information going across, but the calcium channels. The purpose of the calcium channels is to tune the nervous system up and down. So we don't want to be underexcited and swing a tennis racket and miss the ball, be too slow, and you don't want to be overexcited and have a seizure or a manic episode. And then these overexcited states, they're very precise. They don't miss anything, but they're also they're stressful. Okay. And they take a lot of energy. So it's really dialing the nervous system. So we want normally there's no calcium, very minimal calcium. Now this calcium channel, let's say this is a channel and this is where the calcium goes in and out. The channel opens up. It's like a doorway or a portal. It opens up based on the voltage. That's okay. That's a concern. So it can be like a little spark from a cell next door saying, hey, get excited. There's something interesting going on here. Now, there can be genetic variations in these calcium channels. Those are related to autism. There's also one related to EHS. I can't remember the exact variation, but we can, I'll send it to you. Mm-hmm. So now what's interesting is the voltage that the calcium channel opens and closes can be tuned by metal ions. This is something that no one's talking about. I found a paper last year when they did a a very detailed description of the calcium channel and its exact structure. On the outside of the calcium channel is a midas, a metal ion dependent adhesion site. And that adhesion site tunes the calcium channel. Now, I don't know exactly its purpose. I still need to learn more and more, but I have found some studies that shows that it's affected by toxins like lead and, all toxins and minerals, right? So it's healthy minerals and so forth. So that's one of the reasons that toxins can have an impact on the body, is they're affecting this calcium channel. And that's well known in autism and EHS. There's a lot of there's a lot of associations with heavy metals toxicity.
Yes.
Okay. So that's a really interesting factor there. So that kind of says, it's not just the electrical, it's kind of like this combination of both. And now we're learning why. Now, there's also another receptor. There's another way for calcium to get into the cell, and it's the NMDA receptor, and it's a glutamate receptor. That also is excites things up. Now, that's associated with reward and addiction. I think it's associated with cigarette smoking. And that can be activated or overly activated by toxins as well. So glyphosate, which is another big factor that's rising just like EMF, also raises intercellular calcium. So you could see that from these two different mechanisms, you've got calcium, you can have more calcium inside. You could have a lot of false calcium getting in. So kind of fake signaling or fake news, fake messaging to say, get excited, something's coming.
Yes.
And, a lot of people are very excited right now. And then, okay, when the cell is in this excited state, it's more likely to charge and send a signal across. Okay. So that's what the excitation's doing. Okay. Now, the cell membrane also has an impact. So there are epigenetic impacts. There are toxins that can stick to this. There are epigenetic impacts that happen over multiple generations, even your parents and multiple generations back, that can say, hey, we need a more tough membrane because this is a tough thing. This is to tell you to really armor up for this environment, or it can be like, hey, you've been in a safe, nurturing environment for a long time. So that's protective of the cell when the cell membrane holds voltage, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. And the voltage of the cell, because each cell is like a little battery, is also related to how the calcium channel performs. And that cell membrane is made out of lipids. And that the balance of those lipids is really important to how this thing operates, because this calcium channel is not in a world by itself. It's sitting on top of this membrane, and the fluidity of that membrane, if that membrane is really rigid, that's going to be hard. If it's too loose, it can be a problem. Okay, so we also have this concept of cell danger mode. So Bob Navio's work at UC San Diego, that anything that hits the cell membrane, whether it be a virus or bacteria or a toxin, can steal electrons from the cell membrane, and that's a signal to the cell membrane to kind of lock up and go into cell danger mode. Now, when it does that, it collapses, it oxidizes this layer in between the lipids and proteins, and that oxidation, it's using resources. It's kind of burning the lipids. So just going into cell danger mode is a problem in itself. And so if you're in and out, in and out, in and out, you're really burning lipids. So we'll talk more about that as well. So again, what's going on here? Well, whether it's autism or EHS or even some of these other chronic health conditions, this excessive calcium is, number one, false signaling to get excited. So it's detuning the nervous system. You have to think of the nervous system in the brain like a stringed instrument. The people who are low strung, and the people who are high strung. And one of the things that we're doing, and one of the roles of this calcium channel, is to correctly tune you for optimal performance for your environment. Whether it's a harsh environment, you really need to be locked up, or whether it's kind of rest and chill mode, right? So excess calcium can cause free radical damage. And that's kind of getting into what Dr. Paul is talking about with the peroxynitrite, and the free radical damage, the inflammation. You could call this excitotoxicity. That's a term that people are familiar with. It's just, you get so excited that it's too much. And you see that going on not just with EMF nowadays, with a lot of screen time. Everything we're doing is very exciting. It's part of our attention economy, is to get our attention.
Yes.
And so it's not just EMF.
No.
So so I would say So that's that's the slide. So let's see, let me stop the sharing and we'll go back into that. So that's, if people are missing something, that's kind of one of the key concepts.
Yes.
One of the things that people are missing is it's a key concept.
Yes. So it's not all about the cells, is it? But it's very central. What is happening to the cells in this.
Right. So I'll bring it. Yeah, I'll bring it up. It is. I talk at the cellular level, but clearly there's effects going on at bigger levels. And most people, when you hear talking about symptoms, they're talking about blood-brain barrier, gut-brain barrier. They're talking about things that are more system level. And Dr. Paul, when he did his first talk on this, said, the root cause of this is that these channels and everything else is upstream. All the other symptoms are upstream. And he kind of hand waved to that. And he's a biophysicist. He's very brilliant. I said I kind of trusted him on that. But I hadn't seen how they all link together. Now he found a paper this spring, and I'm forgetting the name of the author in the paper, but it was about, if you search for calcium and autism, and it's in one of my resources that I'll point to at the end here. This paper talked about how all the symptoms of autism are all centrally connected to calcium channel, are all related to, whether it's blood-brain barrier, hormone, or inflammation or immune system issues. So that calcium channel thing we talked about, I'm trying for my next talk, I'm trying to do a slide that puts calcium channels in the middle and talks about all the symptoms that calcium channels are related to, so that people can see that the symptoms that people are relating to and feeling, they can see how these are all connected. So that's coming. I'm still working on that. And I'm also trying to do a slide that says, here are the factors that tune your nervous system up, and here are the factors that tune it down. And there are many factors. And so we'll try to talk about some of those, and we'll keep clarifying this. But I think right now is a lot of people are missing some things. And, even if you're EHS and you're pretty sensitive, I notice a lot of people miss factors. So I could go into a lot of people's homes. I went into a home of a wealthy person up in Marin County here who's been electrosensitive for a long time. She has all the resources, and I went in and I'm still seeing stuff going on, and she has the resources. So I want to make sure that people, if you're sensitive, that you're measuring magnetic fields, electric fields, wireless, and dirty electricity. And with magnetic fields, one of the things that took me a while to figure out was that you can have, current flowing in the soil. And one of the ways to measure that is with a magnetic field meter on the ground. And if you pick it up, if you raise it up in the air and it drops off, you've got current flowing in the soil.
Interesting. What kind of magnetic field meter? Like a tri-field meter?
Anything should work for that. The one that I like the most, though, is there's a fairly inexpensive meter. It's under $400. It's the Gigahertz ME3851A.
Yes.
And some building biologists have been using that to measure dirty electricity. They set the magnetic field setting to be over 2,000 hertz. And, we're not supposed to have those frequencies around in our power. So if you put it on the ground outside your building, so what I've done in my house, I'll turn the power off in the entire building. And then I go outside so there should be nothing going on. I go outside and I put this meter on the ground, and I have a reading of usually about 0.3 to 0.5 nanotesla. And then I pick it up, and as I pick it up off the ground, it drops off to about one or two. So if I'm standing up, it's about 0 near my head, which is nice. But it's a great meter because unlike the Stetzer meter and the green wave, which have to be plugged in, you can really find out what the levels are in the air. Like, where is it near your head? Where is it in your bed? So I like that. And also you can have these.
But we don't know the frequency when we're doing that, do we?
You don't know the exact. It's not like an oscilloscope, but we know that it's above 2,000 hertz, and we shouldn't be having any interference in those. Those natural man-made fields should not be up at that level. Or, I'm sorry, the natural. These are man-made things that are above this frequency.
Yes.
So again, make sure we get magnetic fields, electric fields, wireless, and of course, sometimes people get a meter and it doesn't measure the higher frequencies like 5 gigahertz. Even some of the nice meters don't. So I like the acoustimeter is great because it's simple to read, and it goes up to 8 gigahertz.
Yes.
Although now, and then of course with 5G, we're going to need meters that go even higher.
We are, yeah. And just to finish off while you're talking about the meter, the ME3030B from Gigahertz is another alternative. That's cheaper version of that meter you're talking about, but it would do that also, I believe. Well, it measures magnetic fields in any case and electric field.
Above. Yes, it is. Yeah, it's slightly cheaper. Is it? But it doesn't go to 0.1 nanotesla, does it? Because some of the.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think I have that meter. It, the problem is that this meter is interesting because it does 0.1 nanotesla, and some of the biological effects are at very low levels, like 0.3 nanotesla. Mm-hmm. So below the 1 nanotesla level. Maybe.
And that raises the question, though, doesn't it? So you get your meter out, you take your reading. Okay, we've got 0.3, 0.5 nanotesla, whatever, or more. But then
right.
It is in the ground. What do we do?
What do you do? Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm playing around with some, we can talk about that a little bit. There's some audio people there's an audio guy named Alan Marr who's been doing a lot of noise reduction for audio, for decades. He's got some absorbing material that I've been, burying in my yard. He's got these little blocks and things. I don't have one with me. He has lots of materials that you can wrap around at that, act kind of like a ferrite bead. They use field effect to resonate with different frequencies and to bleed off some of these higher frequencies. So, and then it works very passively. So I've been playing around with some of this tech. Haven't figured it all out yet, but we're getting there. At least we can start to measure things, and we're moving in that direction.
Yeah, good. Okay, so the beginning of a solution on that. And I recall you mentioned his name before. In this regard, yeah.
Yeah, and so again, people right now they're using like a radio. You can use a radio to measure dirty electricity, and you've got the NFA 1000 or the 30 gigahertz, 30 measuring above 2000 gigahertz or 2000 hertz. But it's nice you need to get a little bit more granular, and you need to quantify it. Even if you have the radio and you hear it's harsh, you're like, well, how bad is that?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes, of course, because you can detect with just an AM radio up to certain frequencies. Well, the frequencies of the AM radio, which
exactly
megahertz, like 100 and something, 104 or something megahertz, and you just tune into
exactly
the noise. Yeah, but it doesn't give you, obviously, it's not a meter. It doesn't give you a reading. It's just picking up.
Yeah. So as we're trying to quantify this, I want to see a number. We're actually building a database with an autism researcher to record all this stuff, and we're using this meter, the gigahertz meter and the acoustimeter. This is pretty simple meters that parents could use and doctors could use who aren't very well trained. They're cheap. They're not super cheap. But as soon as we get more data on this, we'll see what's really going on here.
Yeah, and the problem with super cheap is it's not always super good.
Exactly.
Yeah, we have to be very careful. Yeah.
Exactly. No, exactly. So this is, I think, it's a good compromise between price and performance. So that's kind of key. I mean, the other area that people will miss. So I think dirty electricity, even for a lot of people who are pretty keen and pretty smart on this topic, they're still missing a lot of dirty electricity frequencies. And some of them are up in the megahertz and gigahertz. In Silicon Valley, there's some frequencies I'm getting hit with that I can't measure right now, but my body feels. So still,
because, we had Dave Stetzer on, and we talked at length about dirty electricity, but so his meter, I think it's 2 kilohertz to something like 100 kilohertz, something like that.
Exactly.
So anything above that, we're not, and there is a definition for intermediary frequencies, which is below the gigahertz range, as I recall. But yeah, I mean, dirty electricity, I mean, really, the names are not particularly important. What's important is that these are man-made frequencies and that they impact our health. And that's why we need to measure them and take action.
Yeah. Now, so the Stetzer filter measures between 2,000 and 100,000. The Greenway filter is a broader measurement. I can't remember the exact specs, but it goes higher. And then, of course, if you have an oscilloscope, you can measure even more.
Yes.
Right. So I'm finding that the 2 kilohertz, the 2 hertz, 2,000 hertz to 100,000 is a key area, but there's even more. I find so. That said, so my body can feel more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think some of the other key areas that people miss is just they're making sure their house is grounded, that they've got a good ground rod, that it's not rusted or oxidized. It's very clean, that the soil is moist around it. And then people frequently miss the metal pipes.
Yes.
So there can be current going on metal pipes. You can have dirty electricity on your pipes, and the Stetzer green wave can't measure those, but this other meter can, or the radio can.
Yes.
So there are strategies for dealing with that with a dielectric couple or with some of Alan's material wrapped around the pipe.
Yes, yeah, and this is a very common problem, and it's something we're not actually talked about. So you do well to raise that. So dielectric couple, all you mean is just a bit of plastic that you put in, which is because we've got
current.
like in the US, we don't have this in Europe, but it's the water, the plumbing is used as part of the grounding system, and so you've got these stray frequencies. Which are not stray because they know exactly where they're going, but we use that term, which can invade your home, from like the neighbor 3 blocks away because he's got, some electrical equipment, a problem, some kind of fault or other.
Exactly.
And the grounding, just to sound that, is that it's actually very easy for an electrician anyway to check your grounding. And I know my electrician, he's got a little meter, and he just puts this on the plug, on the socket, and it gives him a number, and he says, well, yeah, that's good or not. So it is very easy to get that checked. Either you buy the meter, I don't know what the meter's called, but there is a device which you can buy which does that. It's very easy. And you can even get those little testers which cost like under $10, which you put on your sockets again, which can test your ground. Obviously not as good, doesn't give you a number, but it tells you if you've got faults. Also, I guess you've seen those too.
Exactly. And then what frequently happens is the electricians don't ground the switches. So the light switches don't get grounded, which is an issue. So there's a lot of things going on that people are missing even when they think they're totally plugged in. And I'm still missing things, but this is what I've
we all are, and we're all learning, and that's why it's great to exchange on this.
Yeah. Now, I also found that I get a lot of noise not only on the metal pipes, but on the Ethernet cabling, on the shielding, even if it's shielded, and on my telephone line. So if I put a headset on like this, sometimes my ears will burn because I've got high frequency noise on my computer line or whatever. So watch out for the telephone and and Ethernet, and kind of grounding those and putting different materials in there can help with that. We'll point to some of those too.
Yes, and it's quite easy to ground, isn't it? You don't really have to be an electrician to do that using the socket on your electrical. Obviously, first thing is make sure that your home is grounded, and then using that ground to ground everything else. But how do you measure on your Ethernet cable then, for instance? How do you measure what's
I was using that meter just looking at high frequency. Well, I just tried to ground it, and then my body felt the whole environment kind of coming down. I was like, oh God, that was a big one. So underestimated that. So using shielded cable, not just hardwired, but shielded hardwired cable, and grounding that at both ends, near my computer and then near my modem.
Yes.
Because a lot of these little devices like the modems are not grounded. So that leads to another thing, which is I really call my AV closet that has all my AV and my networking in it. I used to call it my AV closet. Now I call it my noise distribution center, because it really is, there's a lot of high frequency noise in there, and there's a lot of points that it can distribute through the house. So I had it going through the Ethernet cable. I had it going through the telephone, going all over the place. I had alarm system in there, and I had a wired alarm system. I was smart enough to do a wired alarm system, but then I had noise going out, and I had an AV system. So I had speakers in all these rooms, but even when the speaker was off, I had noise on ground, my noise on the ground in the neutral in my house. And so the speakers were kind of fluttering all the time. So if you put a meter next to the speaker, you'd see this magnetic field fluttering all the time through the house. So your AV closet is really your noise distribution closet, and it really helps to use shielded cable, ground all the different components, and really clean up the electrical in there. And so and then there's a lot of dirty electricity cleanup technology that people don't know about. I think I've played with about six maybe different devices. People know about the green waves, they know about the Stetzers. They haven't played with the statics so much, but the ones that work really well are the Noble Electronic has worked really well. The PXDNA.
Yes. So these are inline filters, we call them?
They're inline. Now the Stetzers and green waves, they worked great for me. They saved my life, but they're cheaper capacitive filters. They're inexpensive. It's a good system, but some people don't do well with them, because what they do is they take the higher frequencies and they just shift them into being lower frequencies. Whereas the other things like the Noble Electronics and some of Alan Maher's designs work really dissipated across a fuller spectrum. So if those stepters and the green waves aren't working for you, start playing with the other stuff. The Noble Electronics, the PXDNA, and they have a new one called the RxDNA V2X that just really squashes dirty electricity well. Alan just came out with an active dirty electricity filter. He's had these old wrap designs that passively reduce exposures, and they've really reduced field effects and done some wonderful things for very inexpensive cost. But
I beg your pardon, we need an electrician, do we not, to install those?
No. So Alan's wrapping material can just be wrapped around, and then he has a new device. He just came out. I haven't got it yet. It's called the DE Disruptor. He was just showing me on a green wave meter the thing going down to 0, which I was good with. So that's coming in the mail for me now. I've been happy with all his stuff. So, but yeah, some of these devices, there's one from Sedona now called eClean. I'm forgetting the guy's name. Something Miller, Ben Miller, I think it is, from Sedona. Kevin Navarrome. Kevin Navarrome. I'm mispronouncing his name. Has been just connecting me with him. So I just installed one of those on my house as well. Really happy with that as well. So there are quite a few technologies out there that are good for dirty electricity, and it's worth playing with, a range of them if some of them aren't working for us. Some of them require an electrician to install, and some of them do not.
Yes.
But, yeah, exactly.
And obviously the thing is to suck and see, as we say, is to try, see how you feel, because that's really the best guide we have is seeing how it works. Does it work for you or not? And buy
exactly
a 30-day return, from a reputable website. And then if it doesn't work, you send the thing back. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Now, one of the other toys that I've been playing with is, I can see if I can bring this to you. This is a device, I think it's even from the UK. I think it's called Cool Call. So if I had some noise, I have some noise in my phone system here. Actually, this is a device you plug into a 3.5 millimeter audio cable, and it helps filter out some of the noise. There is another one, and I'm not going to be able to pull it out here, but it's called the Jitterbug. It's the Audio Quest Jitterbug. And then you can plug that into USB connections. That can be plugged into your router or your, things that have your computer. I plug it into my car, and my printer, a lot of good places that if something, you want a little bit of a noise reduction, you can plug that in, and that seems to work well for me as well.
Yeah, because when you say noise, you mean EMF interference, yeah?
Yeah, I mean frequencies.
Interference.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're trying to get rid of the things that aren't supposed to be there. And so those different little technologies, most people don't know about these, and they're missed opportunities to improve your environment. Is there anything else? Now, what else do people commonly miss?
Yeah, because that's kind of new things. So I'm very happy that you've shared that.
Okay, good.
New angles. Perhaps so we could just finish on the the autism chapter. In terms of, obviously, so those are solutions for autism, because EMFs is one of the toxins, but there's many toxins. Well, I was going to show you my printout anyway, I scribbled all over it now. What you sent me, but there's so many toxins, and so many, you've pulled it all out here: medical risks, lifestyle, electromagnetic fields, and chemical toxins. There's all these which are different exposures which are working together to create this perfect storm.
Yes, exactly. Perfect segue. Thank you. So what I wanted to talk about next is, people frequently, they miss things in their environment. So we all start with cleaning up the environment as much as possible, except when you're in autism, you usually do the opposite. You jump in and focus on the kids. But when you have EHS or environmental illness, you usually do focus on the outside, and that's great. So I think the important thing to understand is that EMF is usually not your only harmful exposure. So some of the things that some people they'll reduce, even if they can perfectly reduce all the EMF, they're missing a lot of things. And that goes with autism or EHS or environmental illness, a lot of these chronic illnesses. So I would say that what I've learned, and my biggest mistake was, I go after one thing. I went after mercury, I went after EMF. And in all of these cases, you find that it's really like a gang tackle in football, that one may grab you, and then there's this whole glob of people taking you down. Now, this can start even with physical injury, like an accident or a concussion. You get a little bit of inflammation. This is what's going on with a lot of the football players now. It can happen with spinal alignment. So for me, I had a lot of car accidents. I fell back and had a a subdural hemorrhage in my brain when I was like 12 or whatever. So there was an impact there. Car accidents. My spine was misaligned, especially my upper axis. And I find one of the best treatments I ever did for this whole thing for EHS was NUCA, which is a upper cervical chiropractic adjustment where they just gently nudge that bone into place, that vertebrae into place that's right under your brainstem, and it balances out your sympathetic, parasympathetic, it balances out the blood flow. And that, when I'm really, off, I'll frequently check that. And it actually changes the ringing in my ears. So if I'm getting a lot of ringing, sometimes it's from that. Now, Dr. Lisa Naj says, now we'll talk about more things, right? Dr. Lisa Naj, who's at Martha's Vineyard, who's a doctor who's worked on environmental illness and all these things. EHS says that frequently she sees mold as being one of the main triggers for EHS. And she was just telling me over the weekend, I haven't incorporated this in my slides, that we were both talking at NIH in Washington, D.C., which is fantastic. The mold, there are some forms of mold that cause damage to the VGCCs, the voltage-gated calcium channels. Wow, okay, well, you can see it's all coming down to one point. And of course, mold is very common and people become nose blind to that. And so a lot of people are focusing on their EHS, but they're living in a mold house. All right, so that's a challenge. Also infections. So bacterial and viral infections, when the immune system is triggered, that dials up the nervous system, that dials up the VGCCs and the sympathetic nervous system to kind of fight. So infections can be an issue. So Dr. Klinghardt talks a lot about Lyme, but there are a lot of low-grade infections in society. And the one that really got me badly was I had a root canal. So this tooth, number 7, had a root canal when I was 17 years old. And almost all root canals carry chronic infection. Matter of fact, I'll give you, my body is so sensitive, not just to EMF, but to chemicals and smells. If someone has a root canal and their mouth is open and they're about 3 or 4 feet away from me, I'll smell the root canal.
Wow.
So I got because my body—
Root canal smells?
Root canals. So if you're in denial of that, come by and as soon as you open your mouth, I'll say, you have a root canal. No, I don't do that to people, but it's important for people to know. And it was shocking. I did not want to have this tooth extracted, and it took me a while to finally get it out. And also I didn't want to have a metal implant put in. So I eventually had a ceramic implant put in, and I put it in, and my immune system has gotten dramatically better and my EHS has gone down. So infections are a big factor. And toxic chemicals, a total load of toxic chemicals. The one big one now, of course, glyphosate has been a big exposure. We think that's one of the reasons why people are becoming gluten sensitive right now, is because they're in the US, they're spraying the wheat with glyphosate to accelerate the drying as a desiccant. So Dr. Mercola is really big on the 2 big things he thinks are EMF and glyphosate. So
yes, we talked about this, I think, with Dr. Zach Bush. We talked about that. He's done a lot of work.
Yeah, exactly. So range of toxic chemicals. If it's toxic, start lowering your exposures, especially the air quality stuff. So EMF is involved, and it can be other implants, not just, you can have a dental filling, like a metal filling. You could have a knee or hip replacement that's metal. You have a metal plate in your body or screw that's going to be kind of an antenna for the EMF. And that can be a factor, trigger to your immune system, especially if it's nickel or your body's sensitive to the metal. So again, so you could have a metal filling that's mercury, which is obviously an issue. I had a mercury filling touching a gold filling, which was a conductive battery effect. And then that field then was interacting with these other fields. So I had the gold filling in my mouth for a while, but I eventually had that removed as well. And that continued to make things better. So even if you have gold or nickel fillings, I think I would kind of move more to ceramic, those zirconia fillings.
Yes.
Okay. So again.
So really we're kind of flitting, aren't we, between autism and because some of this applies to EHS, some of it applies to autism, some of it's both, isn't it?
So I will tell you that to me, the environmental factors driving EHF and all these chronic illness are the same as autism, and the conditions are the same. The difference is that that these calcium channels are involved in how the brain makes synaptic connections and how it prunes them.
Yes.
And so it can be so severe. If the impact is so severe, it interferes with brain development, and then the kids can't correctly develop and grow.
Yes.
So the difference between EHS and autism, from my perspective, is just as simple as your development as an adult. Your development was not interfered with. If you were having these problems now and you were a child, you would probably go more towards autism or ADHD. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and one of the things I picked out reading this document, which is really good, by the way, is about this, because you talk about it's not just doing certain things, it's doing them in a certain sequence. Could you talk to that?
Yes. So let's see. So what I tell people in autism, we do things exactly backwards. Matter of fact, I told my doctor and I both concluded, who helped me with all this recovery, is we both really concluded we did everything backwards. Now, we had success, but we did it all backwards. So we said, if we were going to do it again, instead of starting with the child and doing all this biophysical or whatever, we would start with the environment and clean up the environment as much as possible. So we talked about the electrical cleaning up. So clean up the environment, clean up the toxins in the environment. I have another slide I could go to that talks about, let me bring up this one. Can I bring up one more slide?
Sure. Yeah, please do.
All right, let's do that and find that again. And this is a slide that I use for autism, but it applies to all chronic health. It applies to all chronic health, and it's a high level. Let's see, there it is. Okay. All right, so you see, so we talk about this is total load theory or allostatic load. Dr. Herbert's big on this. So this affects everybody. So it's almost like a business. You have things that are positively affecting your health, and you have things that are negatively affecting your health, like expenses. And you have these things that are in the environment that are good and bad, and you have these things in your body that are good and bad. So you can see on this diagram on the right-hand side, we have all these positive elements from the environment: sunlight, nature, play, friends, love, therapeutic activity. So we have these negative factors, and those are considered kind of loads. So we have artificial light, screen time. So I would really systematically go down these lists, because you may have something you can't control, like some of your exposures you can't control, but you may find that some of these are in your control, and to do as much of this as you can. So sequence-wise, I tell people to start with the environment, unless you have an infection. If you have an infection in your body, your doctor's going to want to start there. But if you don't have a chronic infection, start with the environment, and it'll really start lighten that load. And what we tell people is, start with that. This is like a load on a balloon. So see how we kind of remove that tie, remove the environmental load. And then after that, now you're in a safe environment, okay, or a safer environment. Right. Now you want your body to feel safe. Although a lot of folks who are with autism or EHS or chemical cells, they're limbic. They're still in fight or flight mode. And that's not a long-term, you're not going to be able to heal in that mode. It's meant for fighting and flighting. It's meant for 5 minutes. It's like trying to drive across the country in first gear. It's very intense. So step 2 would be to get out of fight or flight mode, get unstuck. And then we'd say step 3 is to really start balancing the body, start focusing on infections and inflammation, and remineralize and add lipids. Get your circadian rhythms resynced up. Fix your sleep, get your gut going, your toxic load, strengthen your immune system, all that stuff. So once those loads are lifted, your body will start to kind of upwardly spiral back. So that's that slide.
Yes.
All right. So let me we'll go back to just you and me.
Yeah.
And how we doing time-wise?
We're doing good. So great information there, and very nice visuals, so we can understand it. And this sequence is important. Obviously, it helps anyway. If we don't follow the sequence, it just takes longer. Yeah,
I think so. I think we found, like, with autism kids, they do a lot of like behavioral therapy and all these things, and they're not working at the root cause, and it's like pushing a rock uphill. So we want all these environmental factors to come in as supportive elements. They're positive environmental factors. We want the loads lifted, all the positive stuff to come in. So you're like a business that's got more revenue than expenses. Yeah.
So I just want to ask you, when did the big aha moment come? The big aha moment in this, dealing with your kids, dealing with yourself. When was that? What point was that?
There were a lot of ahas. I would say that it's not just one thing.
Mm.
Understanding how important the environment was a big aha. I always thought if I exercise well and whatever, I could do whatever. And I thought that I was not part of the environment. And then I got mercury poisoning. I said, oh, well, I guess the environment can impact me. But now the big aha is that you are in the environment like a fish in water, and your health depends on the health of that environment, just like the health of the water, especially with EMFs because they go right through your body.
Yes.
So I would say we very much underestimate the invisible factors. I would say we underestimate. A big aha for me was I underestimated EMF, obviously. I underestimated air quality. And another big one that I underestimated was your body's nervous system, the tuning of the nervous system to be into the relaxed mode.
Yes.
That
you
was a
can
big.
do all this stuff. You can do all, this.
You're not in the right state.
Yeah, that's it. So if you're still like really fired up and not chilled out, you're still in this sympathetic mode in terms of your autonomous nervous system, then you're still going to react because we have this incredible ability to react to very, very small exposures, do we not?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And I'm trying to dial it down. Now, my body is still very sensitive, but now I'm less reactive. So I used to, I'd go near a cell tower and I would be out for about 3 days or something, right? You have a headache and you'd be out. And but I learned actually, and a lot of people are still suffering this. So I've learned how to rapidly recover from a lot of these exposures and give myself more capacity. So, so Epsom salt baths are really helpful because they add magnesium, which is a calcium channel blocker, a natural calcium channel blocker, and it adds sulfur that helps with detox. I've added more minerals. I've almost accidentally found that adding more minerals like magnesium, potassium specifically are really helpful. Coconut water was helpful, but even things without sugar are even better. There's a protocol by Body Bio for remineralizing that's really helpful and can rapidly get me back. Hydrogen water, so the antioxidant using hydrogen with tablets or bottles. Any antioxidants, a lot of vitamin C, astaxanthin. I have a green powder with a high auric value that really helps. Turmeric has been really helpful. I have a water that I use called O2 Cool that is highly oxygenated that helps with blood clumping. It's high magnesium, high oxygen. So when you get into these states, the blood clumping is kind of hard to reverse. I've also played around with Dr. Herbert and I also played around with intranasal light therapy. So you put this LED in your nose where a lot of your vascular is, and it can help unclump your blood as well, like a VIE light, VIE light. Mm-hmm. Glutathione is really helpful for quick recovery, and seaweed, sea vegetables, and K2 has been a big one for me. Mm. So a lot of the stuff I found accidentally. Like I tried something and you're just like, oh, this totally works. What's going on here? Then later I understand why it works. So now I'm trying to give people a concept model for here are the different things that you need to control. And then here are some things that are working for me and that are, can help lighten the load and bring you back. Actually, one of the great accidental discoveries was L-theanine. It's an amino acid that calms down the NMDA receptors, and it's a magnesium cofactor. That's probably my best thing for calming down at a chemical level. So that's been fantastic.
Yeah, so it's ongoing, this, isn't it?
Because it's a constant process. It's a constant process.
And you're constantly refining, you're constantly learning things, and there's constant aha moments, in fact.
Exactly. I think that was the big lesson. The big aha was that it's not a step function like turning a light on. This is a process of improving your performance by looking at the environment and your own body and your nervous system and how this is all reacting and working together. And you just keep tweaking it. And it's like a computer or a car. There's no end to how much improvement you can have on a positive side.
And so for somebody who's listening, who's got the message about the dangers, who wants to do something, if you would like to give your top 3 or top 5 giveaways, what would they be?
Let's see. I think I would point to some other, I've kind of talked about the concepts. I kind of have been taking the work of other people and summarizing it as concepts. Your body's a stringed instrument, And I talked about, the ability to tune that and not being too limbic. I will point to some other resources that I think are really good, that other people are doing. So Dr. Jerry Tennant's work, Healing is Voltage, his book,
Yes.
Cancer's On-Off Switches. Dr. Lisa Naj's work on environmental illness, that it's not just EHS, that mold and other factors and chemicals are involved. Dr. Klinghart's work is amazing. He just came out with a new talk called The Mechanics of Brain Detox that I thought was phenomenal, and about the glial lymphatic system. Annie Hopper's work, Wired for Healing, is exceptional, and her concept of dealing with the brain as a limbic is, I think that allows us to tie together these all things together, is that you become a sensitive person. It's not just sensitive to one thing, but you can be sensitive to light and sound and all these factors, and that the limbic brain and the vagal nerve and all those things kind of work together to trigger the body up and to make the body more adaptively responsive, but it's not meant to be that permanently. I would also say that the genetic-wise, we don't talk a lot about genetics, but Ben Lynch's book, Dirty Genes, is outstanding. And I find that there's a section on one of his pathways, the PEMT pathway, that talks about lipids and the liver and gallbladder. I think that's a big exposure for everybody right now. And even if you don't have the genetic mutation, I think that because of the lipid oxidation that's going on from all this EMF, that's going to be a big strain on your liver and gallbladder. That has been a new piece of the puzzle that I've just brought in like in the last week or two. So
awesome. Yeah. So we're running out of time. But any last comments, observations you'd like to share here?
Don't lose your sense of humor, and and when you lose your sense of humor, that means you're in lock, fight, or flight mode.
Yes.
And if you're if you're in EHS and you've been feeling like you need to change the world and be an activist and everything, I would say, relax. Don't worry about it. Focus just on yourself, because the activism is stressful, and all you need to do is you be the change. Focus on your little world and environment, and then fix yourself. Share what you know quietly, and when you're out of fight or flight mode and calm, and you are really resilient, then you can go back to the activism. But don't feel the pressure to do that.
Very good point, and that's something we've not talked about at all in this summit. I've talked about it previously with other guests on my podcast, but very, very important point. And I've seen that so many times. People thinking they're doing the right thing, wanting to do the right thing, wanting to help other people, but they have severe challenges themselves, with these different sensitivities. And actually that is just the wrong thing to do. So the right thing to do is, look, it sounds a bit selfish when I'm saying this, but you have to look after number one first, because if you don't look after number one, then you can't look after your wife, your kids, right, or anybody else, who's near and dear to you. So
yeah, exactly. It's a put on your oxygen mask first situation. And when you have the capacity, when you have more capacity, then you have more capacity to serve. So it sounds a little selfish, but it is an interesting lesson. And a lot of us want to jump in to help other people, but that was another interesting lesson for me.
Yeah. Peter, honestly, it's been fascinating. I knew it was going to be very interesting speaking to you, because I've learned new stuff. I can't remember when I spoke to you, about 2 years ago, maybe, last time we spoke. And obviously you've come on a long way still. And the things you talk about is like the scientists, really. You explain that, you've got this very in-depth understanding. It's really quite impressive. And it seems as though you've left no stone unturned, with regards to your health, with regards to your children's health. And yeah, it's this is really the fact that you're sharing. It's not just that; it's the fact that you're sharing it with other people. Which and I know you do a lot of funding work also, trying to help people and get the message out and do the right thing, as I very simply call it. So I want to thank you for all that, and also just thank you, for participating today, for giving your time. For the EMF Health Summit.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate you sharing everything.
And for all of you who've joined us today, thank you for being part of this movement. My name is Lloyd Borrell. Stay tuned for our next session. Take care. Have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.